Good morning and welcome to day 3 of the OTR International Film Festival. I'm the artistic director T.T. Cernenzi and the host of today's first panel for the festival. The film that we're going to be talking about is Not Going Quietly, and I am honored to have cinematographer and executive producer Ryder Haske here, as well as the director of the film, Nicholas Bruckman. I am so glad to have you guys here. Can't wait to start this conversation. And I just want to kick it off. Again, people are going to obviously be seeing this after they see the film. So I want to start off with finding out a little bit about how you each got involved initially with the project, and especially in particular with the subject of the film, Ady Barkan.
Yeah, I can kick it off. Thanks, TT, for having us into the whole OTR community, for bringing us to Cincinnati. I think it's probably my first time here, and at least first time really getting to experience the OTR neighborhood and seeing all of its vibrancy and sharing this story, and really grateful to Light Inc. and everybody there for having us. And I know that Ady's also going to be delivering a little personalized video message, which I think is going to be really fun if folks maybe have already seen it by the time we air this. We met Ady because Ryder and I have a film production company that actually does storytelling work for brands and social movements. So not just kind of independent films that you'd show at the theater, but what we do is bring all of that experience that we have of independent storytelling and work with nonprofits, social movements, organizations, political candidates for causes that we believe in, environmental justice groups. Black Lives Matter, the organization, is one of our client partners, and try to bring the kind of storytelling that you guys are showing here into short form work for them. And I got a call one day from a woman, her name is Liz Jaff. The folks who've just seen the movie will see her. She's a political organizer. And we had a mutual friend in common. She knew about our work and said, hey, I just met this guy on an airplane. This crazy thing happened. He confronted this senator, and we're going to try to start this organization to fight for healthcare. We want to make a short 2-minute film to launch this campaign. We hire you guys to do it? And so I actually sent Ryder, who met Ady before I did, on a video shoot, and you can jump in and talk about that first meeting.
Yeah, well, I think it was in Baltimore, actually, at the harbor there, and I believe he was attending like a Democratic event, and that's when we learned more about his story and Liz Jaff and everything he was doing. I believe he was giving a speech, but then after the speech, we ended up using like a hotel conference room, and Liz was like, look, I just really need to tell this story about how we met, and I was actually calling you. I was like, I don't really understand what we're doing, but Liz is super energetic and really wants to film some sort of interview about their story. And he's like, yeah, just go ahead and shoot it. And I did feel a little self-conscious because we ended up shooting what basically looked like a kind of between two ferns story. Never made the film, but it was for us really great background because we got to get a sense of their chemistry and the background of the story before we ended up telling it through the source material and in different ways. But we could just tell that there was a little spark of interest there from the very beginning, and it evolved over the next 3 years.
Yeah, subsequent to that first meeting when I sent Ryder out, and Ryder told me, I saw the footage, and Ryder told me, we ended up going to Santa Barbara to Ady's home and doing a long form interview. It was still for the purpose we thought of making this short story, but when I met him and came out there and I saw his humor, his resilience to the disease, and then of course ultimately learned, hey, I'm going to get on the road and we're going to do this thing with disabled and sick and healthcare activists all over the country. This thing that I did with Jeff Flake, I was like, okay, Ady, I know we just met, but I just want to pose this idea to you. What do you think about us coming along that journey, not for a promotional film for your organization, but for a real independent journalistic warts and all version of this story, something that's going to not only track your political rise as the film does, but also really show the intimacies. And he kind of, he said yes right away, basically, and he jokes in some of the other Q&As you'll see, he said because it's his huge ego and he always wanted to be a movie star. And of course, the more poignant reason for it, and I think the reason Rachel agreed, his wife, who's a really important part of the film, is because they really wanted to capture who Ady is and was and will be for their family and for their children. And so we hope the movie and all the footage will serve as a time capsule. We hope he'll be around for a very long time and continues doing his best work right now. But of course, with ALS, you change so quickly, and so I think he was happy to have this moment in time encapsulated in film.
Right. Well, and I always kind of prepare for these conversations in my head before we get started, but then something will come up along the way, and you just hit on a really fascinating piece that I think, audiences will be curious about, because you mentioned this started out initially as just sort of a 2-minute project idea that you guys were going to do. When you had that meeting with Ady and realized that, okay, wait a minute, there's something more here, how does that process change from, we got a quick 2-minute thing that we're going to try to do, to now all of a sudden you're on the road and doing all of this other, again, I'm assuming a much more complex kind of process, and that could take a lot more time. How does that work?
Yeah. Great question. Do you have an answer to that?
Yeah. Well, it's certainly a balancing act, right? Because you have the short-term goals of the campaign, and that very much is a priority. But we know that in the long term, having this film out there is potentially much greater impact. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely some tension between those two different, kind of deliverables that we have for our own personal project and for what the campaign needs. And there are certainly moments when Nick was like dual wielding, a live streaming phone, vertical phone as well, and holding like a camera. So he's got like 2 or 3 cameras at the same time. So we managed to make it work, but it was an added challenge. And I think looking back at it, you always wish that you pushed a little bit further, and even to show a little bit more of what we were doing in the process, because us making these at the time it was midterm election campaign videos and get out the vote videos, awareness videos about healthcare, that process of us making it was very much a part of why we were there. And so you can never record too much. So even though you have the super long day and you've recorded everything for that day, you still need to pick the camera back up again and film that other behind-the-scenes content, which actually ended up being so important to the film, and you'll see it. I'm sure people have seen it, very much of that.
Yeah, that kind of like social justice during the day thing was kind of what they wanted to show, and that was the activism, but the heart of the story and the heart of that trip is them bonding and getting high at night and the joy and celebratory nature of activism. And so I think the main thing in threading those two elements of helping them with their kind of promotional work and then doing the story was the kind of journalistic line between the two. And that, for us in that initial conversation with Ady, this film was not going to be, and I think although of course it shows him, and I think in a very positive light, it had to be the real under the hood element, not just under the hood of how ALS, affects a family and the relationship between him and his son, but also under the hood of seeing them build this social movement, when them discussing what's the strategy going to be. And that was really important to me because I wanted to unpack how you can, from scratch, from a viral video, from cell phones. We were talking before this about about Black Lives Matter and social movements built on short, tragic cell phone videos, and that's kind of what they did here. And I think showing that it's not just, circumstance that makes these things happen. It's strategy, it's community, it's solidarity that can launch these things. I thought that would be an empowering thing for audiences to see, that say, oh, Ady did this, we can do this too. We care about this issue. The movie's about healthcare, but it's really not. It's about raising your voice even when you don't have a voice.
Right. And it's interesting too, as I'm listening to you guys talk about this, there's this piece that, again, you said initially with the work that you do as a company, trying to find ways to find that sweet spot for the social activism. I'm kind of curious, from an investigative side of things, have you found ways and opportunities to kind of work with the other side? Because again, it seems like there's, especially in this case, this is obviously a really passion project and someone you really care about. Yeah. But is there someone that you've worked with on the flip side that you might not have been as comfortable working with, but you're like, hey, we need to tell this story too?
Yeah, I mean, we tend not to. I got into filmmaking from an activist background originally. It's not like I sort of wanted to be just do a kind of artistic films and then was like, oh, let's make something political. It was really that I kind of during the Bush-Iraq Afghanistan era was, one of those kind of activists in the streets trying to stop the war, and was very frustrated that we couldn't, and was always interested in film, but I really quickly, immediately saw that filmmaking, and I think all of the folks in this community and throwing this festival know this, is just this completely unparalleled tool to build empathy and create connection between people, which is what is at the heart of many of our, social issues and inequalities and conflicts. And so to me, I think if I could have written an article about healthcare justice that would have been seen as widely and had as much of an impact as I hope this film will have, I probably would have chosen that medium. And this is all to say that, we try, of course, not everything we do. We have a business that tells stories for big, large, technology companies that have their certainly tension points and conflicts. But we don't do any work for Republican or conservative storytelling, just based on kind of what the issues and kind of approach that we take. And that's not to say that one cast any aspersions on folks that do, but we try to align our values into the work that we do. And when we do work with large corporations, that of course everybody, including nobody is pure, and the world is a nuanced place. But often when we work with big companies, we'll talk about the social or environmental campaigns that they're working on. And yes, some of the time they're doing those campaigns to cover up some of the worst things that they're doing. So of course, everybody, media makers, film festivals who take on sponsors, I'm not judgmental about this in any way, but I think it's important to embed your values into the way you finance your films and all of that stuff.
Right. That's fascinating. You're right. We're all part of this massive ecosystem. And yes, there are all those different pieces that are there that you have to kind of navigate and figure out. And for us as a festival, we have these 5 tenets that are kind of guiding what we do. And it's, diversity, disability, freedom, faith, and identity. And what has happened and kind of grown out of that is this idea that we're always kind of looking at and trying to find that intersectionality amongst those themes. So a lot of our films, especially this year, and it's planned but also not planned at the same time, because ultimately, you're going to find subjects who are going to be crossing over all of those issues along the way as individuals. So it's great to have that. The intersectionality that I'm getting from you is even broader than that, though. So I'd love to hear you guys kind of talk through, because again, you're talking about environmental issues and you're doing political stuff. So how does intersectionality in that broader case kind of come out for you guys?
I'll say something quickly and then let you jump in, because I've been talking. But in my experience, and just something about this festival that's really meaningful to me, is that I don't identify as a person with a disability, but I have a lot of disability rights organizing in my family. My grandfather was blind and started the Lighthouse for the Blind in India. This is back in the 50s when there was no services whatsoever. And so the kind of work that LAD does, is important to me and my storytelling. My aunt has CP, and her husband is also a person with a disability, and they were very active in the ADA movement. And I remember very distinctly my aunt telling me about the telethons they used to have, where they would kind of trot her out in her crutches and raise money off of her without her really knowing what was going on, when she was 5 years old, and this being a really humiliating experience for her back in the 50s and 60s, and just gave me a sense of how important it is to really empower and include authentic disability perspectives in media and in storytelling. And we consulted with folks with disabilities in the editing process to make sure that perspective was included, including the people who were in the film. Okay. And my feeling about this issue, and it's something I've tackled in another film that I did previously called La Americana, which was about an immigrant who was reconciling with her daughter's disability, as well as the injustices of the U.S. immigration system, is just that the issue of disability is very much connected, or intersectional, as you say, to every other element of how our society treats its most marginalized and disenfranchised people. And so it cuts across the environmental and class and racial issues that you're bringing up. And so I hope some of those elements are subtly come across in Ady's story.
Right.
Yeah, you want to add anything to that?
Well, I know we're wrapping up, but
yeah, sorry, I didn't want to.
No, just that I have really appreciated watching the kind of symbiotic relationship between the type of media that we started making for Ady and how that really elevated and launched his ability to have a larger platform. And so it was those initial pieces, that 2-minute video we talked about earlier, that really kicked off all of that incredible fundraising and that press tour that he did and brought all of those ideas out into a much broader audience so that we could make that next step to have a bigger tour and sponsor all this media. And now watching the organization Be a Hero grow has just been incredible, and it just shows the importance of filmmaking to building movements and organizations.
Right. Well, thank you both very much, and I can definitely say that this conversation could have gone on a whole lot longer. It's going to be great. I know I'm going to get the chance to talk to each of you later after this. I want to make sure, though, that for the viewers here, that you would get to understand that today is an action-packed jam day full of events that are going to be taking place throughout the festival. You can find out more at otrfilmfest.org, find out about getting tickets, where we're going to be, come to the events, meet the filmmakers. You can hopefully have the opportunity to ask them questions yourselves, have your own conversations with them, and have conversations with other people that are attending the festival as well. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the movies.
Thanks, DT.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.